Hi, today we're going to talk about designing for people. We're taking a look at patterns that people follow whenever they interact with technology. This information is coming from Tidwell, Brewer, and Valencia's fantastic Designing Interfaces book, 3rd edition. This book is really good at teaching non-designers designing patterns and design strategies. The layouts for the slides came from Slides Carnival. Most of the information in this presentation comes from their book. The commentary is mine. Okay, so the first pattern that people will often come across when they come across a website is this idea of safe exploration. Please let me play around with your website without getting in trouble is the thought process. I want to be able to get into your website, see what it's about, make a change without doing anything drastic. A really good example for this is if I'm playing with video filters or picture filters. Suppose I change my wedding picture from color to black and white. I want to be able to go back from that, otherwise my wife will kill me. Some lessons you get out of this: have lots of ways for your users to explore the interface that you built. Allow them to experiment, but don't make it cost anything. Don't make any changes permanent. Next thing that users want in a website is this idea of user gratification. They want to be able to get in, be productive now. They don't want a steep learning curve. They don't want to have to learn anything, and God forbid they don't have to think. It's human nature that we want it to do it right now. Good examples of this in Microsoft Word, the ribbon bar. The very first ribbon bar you see is the one that most people interact with. How to make it bold, how to change the font, how to change the color. Android Studio, whenever you create a new project, it creates a working app. It instantly works. The lesson you gain out of this is make the first or most common task simple and easy. Make it a 2-button click, a 3-button click. The less the users have to do to get in and productive, the less complaining you'll hear from them and the more happy they'll be with your site. The next term is satisficing. This is an odd word. This is a combination of satisfy and sufficing. When you satisfice, you find something that's good enough. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. The idea here is the user doesn't want to spend a lot of time learning your interface, so instead they find something that does what they need and they move on. This often leads to some really weird usage habits with your users. I've seen people that want to download data from a website into Excel. I've seen them download it first into Microsoft Word and then copy and paste it from Microsoft Word into Excel. When you ask them, they say, well, that's how it works. That's not the most efficient way to do, but it works. That is what happens when you satisfy or satisfice, rather. You just get something that works close enough. The lessons in this are pretty major. First of all, give clear directions on what to do first. Make your labels easy to read, short, easy to read. I don't want to see a sentence in a label. I want to see a word. Print, save, nice and simple. If applicable, make your layouts communicate meaning. Most important stuff's at the top, maybe across the middle in a Z. Make it really easy to move around your interface. Back, forward, make sure nothing gets lost. And you go back to that idea of expiration, make sure when you go from page to page you don't lose anything. If your interface is complicated, your users have to think. And when your users have to think, they get angry. And when users get angry, they leave. So keep it simple. The next one is changes in midstream. This occurs whenever you're halfway through a process and realize you want to do something completely different. So, example, I do this all the time. I go to Amazon and I look for a product that I really want. So I go through the process to buy it and I put it in the shopping cart and I go, wait a second, do I really want to spend this $100? And so I think, and then I X out. I come back an hour later, a week later, and it's still in my, still in my shopping cart. That is a great example of changes in midstream. I made a decision to do something different, but the website supports that. The idea here and the lesson here is to make it really easy to start, stop, and come back later. A web form that will save your users information with a cookie is a good example of changes in midstream, so I don't have to come back and refill out the 30-page form. Most of my answers are already there. When you're programming desktop apps, be careful with modality here. This is when a dialog box pops up that you have to interact with. You don't want anything that pops up that you have to interact with because your user gets scared and wants to back out. It's hard to. Okay, related to change in midterm is the idea of deferred choices. I don't want to answer everything right now. Just let me in. Websites that allow you to register with only a username and an email are the best example of this. I can get in, I can interact with the site, I can work with it, but I don't have to give away all my information right off the bat. I simply log in, create a username and password, verify that my email addresses are taken, and boom, I'm in. Later, I can go back to profile and upload my picture, put my quote in there, and all the other stuff that profiles ask you for. By putting that off till later, your users get in, get productive quickly, and then later on they can come back and customize and make it happy. So lessons here. Minimize your upfront choices. Make some of your fields required, but not too many. Think about what really truly is required and require that. I always get leery when I'm on a website that requires me for my phone number. Why do you want my phone number? When are you going to call me? Who are you going to sell this to? Provide reasonable defaults. So if you have a state drop down, have a reasonable default for state. Again, have some mechanism to come back later, so I can save this and come back. And perhaps allow your users to explore your site without a registration. Create some type of paywall that lets people play with the site without interacting with it. A lot of online games will do that. So it lets you in, play, and then force you to register 2 or 3 levels in. Okay, so now the next site is called Incremental Construction. This is when you're on a site that allows you to upload a lot of data and you're creating something. The best example that comes to mind is an online resume creator or a job board. You want to apply for a job now, but the website wants every piece of information about your job history. I don't have that right now. I don't know when I started my first job back in 1985. So a good website will allow me to build my resume or build the site piecemeal. As I get information, I can come back and fill it in. Do not force your users to go through a precise order. Even though that's how you think it works, it's not how your users are going to think it works, because you and your user are two totally different people. So have your activities allow me to create the objects in the order I find important. The lesson here, allow your users to work in small chunks in your website or your app. Allow users to save and come back later, and the finished product will be built regardless of the order we put it in. Okay, the next idea is the idea of habituation. If you're watching this video, you know how to work with a Windows box or a Mac box. You understand how the browser works. That's habituation. You've interacted with enough browsers that it doesn't matter what browser I throw at you, you can figure it out. You know how to browse, you know how to bookmark, you know how to close, you know how to go back. I get real annoyed when I'm on a website and I can't control V into it. Blackboard is this. It doesn't let me control C, control V in and out of it. I have to use different tools. It's just a right click, but it's annoying because everywhere else in my world, control C, control V, copies and pastes. Likewise in your phone. Pinching. It's the same thing in every phone. Even though someone tried to copyright it, it's still a motion that's habitual across devices. The lesson here is use consistent interfaces. Again, going back to the Microsoft Office products, those ribbon bars look the same in every product. That's consistency. Have the same effect of the same, or the same action of the same effect always. If I hit Control S, it should save my app, or it should save my code. It shouldn't print. That would be really weird. Okay, so you're designing an interface, and you want people to use it. Ideally, you want your people to sit down and work with your interface for hours and hours at a time, but that isn't always the case. That's where the concept of microbreaks come in. You've got 2 minutes to check your email. Your app, if it makes sense for this, should allow your users to very quickly get in. Tinder and Instagram and Snapchat are really good at this. If I'm on the bus and I want to look at my Instagram, I push a button and I have content. I don't have to jump and pick types and log in big servers. It just works. The game Flappy Birds from about 10 years ago was great at this. If I wanted to go in and play Flappy Birds, it was instant. Well, it wasn't the greatest game, but boy, was it addicting, and I could play it one-handed on the bus. If you could design your app or your interface so that people can use it one-handed while they're on the bus and it be meaningful, you have yourself a viral app. Viral in a good way. So the lesson here, make the app easy and fast to access. No complicated setup and really fast loading. Okay, so now we're going to talk about how users interact with your system. One of those is spatial memory. The button used to be there. Where'd it go? This happens to me a lot when I'm training users. I go from term to term or year to year. The program I'm using changes and the save button moves or the update button is a different place. That annoys your users to no end. Do whatever you can to keep the objects in the same place. People often remember stuff by where they were. Think about when you walk around your house at night. You know everything is in the house without the light on. You want to mess with somebody? Move the chair and watch them trip. So, lesson here. Don't move stuff around unless there's a really good reason to do so. Make your dialog box look like everybody else's dialog box. Put save where everybody else puts save. That way when your user comes in, they know where to look for stuff. Understand that if you create a drop-down list, the very first object in the drop-down list and the very last object in the drop-down list are the ones that people are going to remember. That's list learning from psychology. So make those the most important. That way they can find them. Okay, related to spatial memory is prospective memory. Prospective memory is reminding yourself to do something later. That's when we're planning to do something in the future. If it makes sense for your interface to do this, allow them to put in reminders, simple reminders, unobtrusive reminders. A good example is the Blackboard calendar. You can add your own items to the calendars to remind you to do your homework for the night. So the lesson here, give people the ability to create their own reminders. And the more flexible this is, the better off it is. Allow more than one way to create a memory, whether it's a right click, a keystroke, or a form. Make it simple and make it easy to deal with, and people will use it. Next one is streamlining repetition. People hate to repeat stuff. In fact, in the programming world, you probably heard DRY, don't repeat yourself. If you make your users do the same thing twice, there's a bigger chance of error. A good example of streamlined repetition working is on a website you're filling out and you're ordering something, and you enter your credit card and it asks you for the shipping address. You type in your address, and then it asks you for billing address. Well, you're typing the same address again. Many websites offer a checkbox that says use shipping address or billing address. That is streamlining your repetition. Rather than having to type the address twice, you click a button and it copies down. Google does this with your forms. If you go to a website, you fill in some forms, it holds your commonly used form fill information. Next one is keyboard only. If it makes sense, put a lot of keyboard shortcuts into your app or your interface. Only if it makes sense. If it doesn't make sense, don't do it. But if you have data-intensive tools, allow people to keep their hands on the keyboard off the mouse. The act of leaving the keyboard, reaching to the mouse, actually stops people from typing and puts a little bit of slowdown in their day. Now, I agree the mouse is a wonderful way to interact with the GUI system, but if I'm just typing, I should be able to tab around my box. I should be able to hit keystrokes to switch between forms. Code that in and train users on how to use them. Example like Control C, Control V I talked about before. That's a keyboard only command that allows me to copy and paste stuff. And the last one, this idea of social media. Like it or not, we're in a social world. I want to know what my friends think about this app. So allow me to put reviews in, communicate with other users. Steam does a fantastic job with this. Steam allows me to see what my friends are playing right now. Steam allows me to see what my friends think about a game. We can send recommendations back and forth to one another. It's incredible. If it makes sense for your app to do that, put that in. Put some ability for commenting or communication with friends. It's hard, but it'll make your app more likely to succeed. All right, so these were patterns that users will typically use when they interact with your interface. Again, this information came from Tidwell's fantastic book. So thank you very much.